What's up, y'all? I don't know if this is going to be working or not. Let me know in the comments if you would. I'm in St. Louis right now. I've got somebody like cutting the lawn behind me. And my travel setup I haven't used in a while, so I'm hoping this works. Let me know if y'all can hear me though. That's the big question I have. Guys, we got a lot of macro stuff today for sure. Chilling at the pool, says Bob. That's right, buddy. Can you hear me okay? I got the mic in right here. I don't know if it's working or not, so let's see. Let me know if you can hear me, man. Guys, we've got the Jerome Powell's. You got sound. Nice. Very nice. We've got the Jerome Powell statements from yesterday. We got a lot of tariff updates. We got the tariff deadline coming tomorrow morning. So there's been a lot of movement there. We've also got the crypto report, some mentions of DPIN in there, so we're going to talk about that. The Rover call today. I'm going to tell you about the open data set and how they're going to get some revenue through the door. So a lot of good stuff happening. The tariffs, things have progressed, but not everyone's a winner. And we're going to talk about that as well. One of the things I want to talk about, though, to open things up, there is a movement from the Dems right now to force the release of the Epstein files. So this is big breaking news. I'm going to talk about how that works. So essentially, there's the rule of five. So this is something that was enacted back in 1928. So they're going way back. The way it works is that they need 5 senators on the Homeland Security Committee to submit a request for information. And in this case, they'd be asking for all investigative materials related to the DOJ inquiry into the Epstein situation. Said here, though, that it would allow for redacted information to shield private information from any victims, but it would also include the recent interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. So will this happen or not? As it turns out, it looks like they would have to hand over the files by August 15th and brief senators by August 29th. And it said that this is not the first time they've used this. They used this back in 2017 against Trump to release documents about the old post office in Washington, D.C. They also used it once with George W. Bush back in 2000 related to the census back then. So wouldn't be the first that it's used, but it is very rare. Now, did go on to say that it would likely lead to a legal battle here. There it is. So it's not yet clear whether the DOJ or Trump administration will seek legal measures to block the release, but it is likely to be challenged in the courts. But one thing is for certain, they are not letting this go, guys. This is not going to be let go. You can expect more news there. Some other news. This has to do with, we can get this off the screen, close that. You guys remember there's missing footage from the jail the night that Epstein was offed. Well, there's a CBS investigation. They seem to have not only found the missing footage, but there's also some mysterious orange shape that was recorded ascending the stairs to where Epstein's cell is located. Originally, they said it was a corrections officer carrying up linen or inmate clothing, but on further investigation, they're saying that the person wearing an orange inmate jumpsuit was, the reason why they were skeptical the first time around. But now they're saying that it traveled up the stairs to Epstein's cell block around 10:40 as the last recorded movement in that direction of Epstein's cell before being discovered. So certainly some questions. Still when it comes to the Epstein situation. Now, this is interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there's a hack on the Minnesota government database. I want to play this for you guys. And let's see if
We now know that this was not a system glitch or technical error. This was a deliberate, coordinated digital attack carried out by a sophisticated external actor, intentionally and criminally targeting our city's information infrastructure. From the moment this threat was identified, we've taken swift action to defend our systems and protect our community. We've activated the city's Emergency Operations Center to coordinate a whole of government response. We've retained 2 national firms with deep cybersecurity expertise to support our recovery. And we're working closely with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, to trace the source and scope of the breach.
Very interesting stuff there. Hopefully that audio came through. Pretty wild though. Pretty wild that that big hack happened. I had not really seen that much in the news, but curious, like, who was behind that hack? You said the coffee. We'll talk about the coffee. Why are we still talking about that guy? Talking about Epstein? Yeah, no kidding. The Epstein files will never come out. Too many elites involved. Dude, there are some seriously powerful people tied to that. And it's crazy. Like, there have been multiple presidents that could have released documentation that haven't, and Trump is another one. It's like, what is going on there? I agree, man. All right, let's get into some serious news. Let's get into the macro stuff. One of the things that's been flying under the radar a little bit with the tariff news is this de minimis exemption that is no longer going to be in effect. And this is a big deal, guys. Essentially, there was an exemption on tariffs if you kept your orders under, I believe it was $800. This is like drop shipping companies for smaller businesses. They really used this loophole to avoid tariffs, but it looks like they are now closing it. They did say that they called it a catastrophic loophole that shippers use to evade tariffs and funnel deadly synthetic opioids or below market products into the U.S. And it's for parcels under 800 or less. In fact, when I was ordering direct from China for some of my outdoor enclosures, like, I would always keep my orders below $800 to avoid tariffs, because I made that mistake once, and I ended up having to pay like a few $100s in tariffs. I was like, what the hell? So this is going to be a really big deal for a lot of people that import that were using this loophole. Said that Temu is one example they used that's going to be really impacted by this. But shipments from China and Hong Kong account for most de minimis shipments to the U.S., according to the White House. Some history here I thought was kind of interesting. So this was added to the Tariff Act of 1930 several years after the law's passage, and it was intended to facilitate trade by eliminating administrative burden by collecting modest import duties. But these imports have really exploded. Between 2015 and 2025, went from 134 million of these smaller shipments per year to 1.4 billion, and 4 million per day. So again, this is going to be a really big deal. In particular, the smaller online businesses, drop shipping businesses, businesses like Temu that go straight to consumer. This is going to have a huge impact. So something to certainly be aware of. All right, where's the next tab here? All right, let's talk about where we stand on the tariffs. There's been a lot of movement over the last day or so. Turns out in last weekend, they talked about the EU-US tariff deal. It's not yet finished. So they're still working through the details. There is very mixed feelings, particularly from people in the EU, about the tariff deal that was struck. It was very criticized. They thought that Trump got too much out of the deal in the U.S. But it sounds like while it's still being worked out, while they are making progress, Trump announced this morning that, well, we're going to put a 15% on wine and spirits, which is actually a pretty big deal. We do a lot of trade with the EU. We export a lot to them as well, especially when it comes to bourbon. I have a buddy in the bourbon industry that's like, man, they've been seriously wrecked this year because of all the back and forth on the tariffs. It's been really, really hard on their business. But it sounds like we are putting that back in play until the EU comes to the table in good faith to get something done. So that's the news with the EU. Sounds like we are getting close, though. We also had an update this morning with Mexico. Sounds like we are moving to another 90-day, I wouldn't say a pause necessarily, but they are extending out 90 days for more negotiations to take place. It says they'll continue to pay a 25% fentanyl tariff, 25% on cars, 50% on steel, aluminum, and copper. More on the copper front, by the way, on some exemptions that were also announced there. So it said that there will be continued cooperation on the border as it relates to all aspects of security, including drugs, drug distribution, and illegal immigration into the United States. So good news. I mean, so it's not like we're facing crazy high tariffs with Mexico, like what was being threatened. So 90-day extension, more or less there. In Mexico, that's a big deal. They're one of our biggest trading partners. I'm going to show you, that breakdown in a minute here. Another deal with, looks like Pakistan. So Pakistan has a deal struck. It said that we're going to work together to develop their massive oil reserves. So that's a big deal. The more that we can work out getting oil from other countries, the better. Obviously, as oil prices are driven down, that has a huge impact on inflation, which means the Fed can cut rates. So it's all interconnected, guys. So it sounds like we're getting close there. He did talk about, hey, we're going to be talking with South Korea later today. So this was yesterday. And indeed, they did talk to South Korea. Looks like there was a deal struck there as well. The South Korea, ahead of the August 1st deadline, got a deal struck. It looks like we are talking about 15% tariffs on goods from there. Of course, at CNN, they're like scrambling to get a deal done. But it looks like actually we came out pretty well in this deal. Says that the deal is that South Korea will give the United States $350 billion for investments owned and controlled by the United States and selected by myself. That's what he said. Sometimes the details end up being a little bit different than what he first says. But it's funny, though. The South Korean president announced on Facebook their deal. What a world we're in, where like Truth Social and X and Facebook is where presidents of countries are announcing tariff deals. That is nuts to me. But that's where we're at. So it says that they did reach an agreement despite a tight time frame. It is worth noting, I didn't realize this, but Lee took office just in June. So he is a newer president because his predecessor was removed for declaring martial law. So I was unaware of that. So a little bit more detail here. It says among the $350 billion fund, $115 billion will be dedicated to shipbuilding cooperation. This is something that when Bessent was on that interview with Tucker Carlson earlier this year, which I've cited several times, there were several things they said we needed to work on. One was we need to start building ships again because we are importing all our ships. So interesting to see that here. I imagine the other parts that he mentioned, which were pharmaceuticals and the rare earth minerals, those are also going to be parts, I'm sure, of the other negotiations that are ongoing. But shipbuilding, a big part of this one. The rest will go to semiconductors, secondary batteries, biologics, and energy. It says the new tariff is still, this is good context too. The tariff is 15%, which is still higher than the 10% that we had on them prior since April after reducing from the originally announced tariffs. And it said that the South Korean economy has actually been really hurt by these tariffs. And I think we're seeing this with a lot of different countries, is that they're kind of, calling us on our balk, but it is actually having a pretty big impact on their economies because they are very reliant on the U.S. Said that their GDP actually contracted by 0.1%, the first negative reading in 4 years. So if we had gone through the 25% tariff, I think it would have absolutely crushed their economy. So 15%, I think they're very willing to deal with us and give us what we wanted. So will we see other countries follow suit? I don't know. We'll see. But it kind of sums it up here. It's a dilemma facing each of America's trading partners. Given to Trump's demands to get off this August 1st worst offenders tariff list. Oh, man. Who else? Jerome Powell's on that list, too. Worst offenders, just not when it comes to tariffs. Or stand your ground and face potentially crippling import duties. And that is true. Like, so many countries are so reliant on the U.S. Let's see. In other news, other tariff news, then we're going to sum this whole thing up. There we go. There are still some outstanding countries, Canada being one of them. Canada is also one of our biggest trade partners. So you see, we have Mexico, Canada, and China are our three biggest trade partners. This is what Trump had to say. Wow, Canada just announced that it's backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. So he just said that like yesterday. So things still need to progress with Canada. But it's worth noting that Trump is promising to move forward with 35% tariffs there, which would be a major setback in relations between the two countries, but one with more limited economic efforts for now. And that's because about half of goods that travel between the two countries are able to trade largely duty-free due to this USMCA agreement that we had. So while we are looking to impose higher tariffs, it actually is not going to make as big of an impact as a lot of people thought, given that there are a lot of exemptions with Canada. Okay. Let's see. There's another one here. Let's see. India. So India is also not moving in the right direction as Trump lumped them in with Russia, calling them dead economies. so I guess we know how Trump feels about India. But I think that there is some good context here. Says that the tensions appear to stem from India's hard negotiating stance. India is known to be really, really hard on tariff negotiation. They tariff the shit out of people and are not willing to budge, and don't like when other people tariff them. So we'll see how this progresses. But one thing that's worth noting here is there's some major implications on Apple, because Apple was looking to move their production and manufacturing their iPhone from China over to India. So I think Apple could put some pressure here to get these deals done with India. But we'll just wait and see how that plays out. One other one that has escalated is Brazil. Okay. So Brazil, 50% tariffs on copper and some other products. So this is really interesting. This is actually very politically motivated, why he's putting these tariffs on them. But it says here that Trump signed executive actions on Wednesday imposing, let me just make sure, biggest, India, biggest, I just want to make sure my, because I can't see my chat here. I just want to make sure that I'm not talking and like something stopped working on my microphone here, so we're good. Okay, so Trump signed executive actions on Wednesday imposing a 50% tariff on Brazil, a 50% tariff on certain copper products, and suspending a tax perk for all countries. We talked about the tax perk already, which was the de minimis. That's what we let off with. Anything under 800 is now subject to tariffs, are no longer exempt. Went on to say Pakistan cited what we already talked about there. South Korea, we already talked about that. But Brazil is escalating. So they previously threatened to impose 50% tariff in Brazil in this letter sent to their new president. And he claims that there's serious human right abuses that have undermined the rule of law in Brazil. Well, it turns out that the prior president is pretty cozy with Trump. And he lost the last election. And he's facing trial for not wanting to let go of power and staging a coup attempt against the new president, Lula. And Trump is basically saying, you need to drop your charges against that prior president because we're friends. And I don't believe that he tried to stage a coup. Look, I don't know. I'm just reading. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I remember some reports coming out about that. It didn't seem great. But that is why he's putting these tariffs on Brazil, basically. Okay. He's demanding that they stop trying to charge the prior president who he's friends with for this staged coup. But here's where it matters. So it does say that the order appears to have more bark than bite. Okay, it exempts most of Brazil's most significant exports to the United States, including orange juice. Yes, there's certain aircraft parts, I don't know, oil, coal, minerals, various chemicals, Brazil nuts, but coffee. Coffee will face the higher tariff. Why does that matter? Well, 16.7% of Brazil's coffee exports go to the U.S. They are the largest coffee exporter in the world. And this is a major threat. And it's going to really impact not just Brazil, but also the U.S. So it says coffee is not only one of Brazil's most iconic exports, but also a key source of income for its rural economy, employing over 8 million people directly and indirectly. The United States has been the primary market for Brazilian coffee, which remains the world's largest exporter. Currently, 16.7% of their exports go to the U.S. It went on to say that, this is before they knew this was definitely going to go into effect, this article. Said that 4 trade sources told Reuters that a 50% tariff would be unworkable. U.S. roasters are unlikely to absorb such a price hike, and Brazilian exporters cannot afford to lower the prices that drastically. So it's going to result in American buyers turning to other origins, other sources, and Brazil redirect shipments towards Europe and Asia. And it says if the tariff takes effect, which it sounds like it's going to, Brazil coffee will lose key price competitiveness in the U.S., especially in commercial segments. So this actually is going to be pretty disruptive to any coffee companies that are in the U.S. that are importing from Brazil. There's a lot of them, and it's definitely going to hurt Brazil's economy. So we'll see if that's enough leverage to get something done there. But man, if you're a coffee drinker, you might see prices go up a little bit. We might see prices go up. One other thing in this article, actually, it's in the prior article. Let me go back. Is about copper, and we've talked a lot about copper. Okay, so they announced 50% tariffs on imports of semi-finished copper products, but here's the main deal here. Says that the tariffs will not impact refined copper, a critical input for manufacturing. Copper prices in New York plunged 19% as Wednesday as markets were relieved that the White House exempted refined copper. So this is a really big deal. This announcement indicates that the copper tariffs are much more limited in nature than the market originally understood. And that is why, y'all, we saw this drop in copper prices. Boom. So for me, you guys know, if you watched my show, I am a very bullish long-term copper. I've been kind of waiting on a lot of these commodity plays to wait for a pullback. Copper is tied to manufacturing. So my thought has kind of been, hey, once we see a recession or a major slowdown, we'll probably see copper prices drop. That'll be a good time to get in. Because I think long-term, as emerging countries build out electrical infrastructure, as we see EVs, as we see these data centers built, copper is going to be really, really in high demand. And there's expected to be shortages. So I've been kind of waiting for a pullback. I'm looking at this as an opportunity. I think it's probably a little bit too much of a pullback. So I left my notes in Chicago. So when I get back, when the market's open Monday, I'm probably going to make a play on copper after this pullback. And I think long-term, very, very bullish. In fact, that book that I cited yesterday, How to Listen When Markets Speak, that's one of the chapters is really highlighting copper and as an investment in the longer term. So that is something I'm looking to get exposure to on this pullback. Got to strike sometimes when those opportunities arise. Not to say maybe it could go lower, but I definitely didn't want to buy and invest after we'd seen such a run to start this year. So let's take a look. Let's just get an overview here of what's going on with our biggest trade partners. Let's go down the list. So Mexico, negotiations are ongoing, 90-day extension, so nothing too crazy there. China, we have made a lot of progress. I reported on that, I think earlier in the week or last week. Again, we have 90-day extension on that, but it seems to me that there's a lot of progress being made. Canada, things have escalated, but it's not as bad as people think because we do have that agreement in place that exempts a lot of the imports and exports. So not a huge deal. Japan, we have a deal already with. South Korea, we have a deal with, I believe, Vietnam. And then obviously the EU, ongoing, we're getting close. So really looking at the list, there's a lot of progress being made. And I do think that it's looking more and more likely we're going to fall between 10 and 15%, maybe in 12.5% range on average, which, if you remember, when we played that Scott Bessent interview, he cited the 20% tariffs we put on China, and he used 10% as an example that we could land on. I think maybe we might land slightly above that, and maybe as we negotiate more, and maybe that's around energy, investment into the country, etc. Maybe that drops down to that 10%, but I believe 12.5 to 15% is likely where we're going to land. I think the market can absorb that. Not to say we won't see any inflation from it, but I don't think it's going to be nearly what people thought. And I do think it's going to be interesting to see how much revenue we generate from those tariffs, and especially if there is, the bill is already put into place or it hasn't been approved, but they're looking to send out a stimulus based on the tariff revenue. I think people would feel a lot differently if that were to happen. And all of a sudden you get a $600 check in your mailbox or more, depending on how many people in your family. Tariffs aren't so bad all of a sudden, but we'll see. How is the dollar reacting though? So DXY is the dollar weighted against the euro, the yen, the sterling, Canadian dollar, Swedish krona, and Swiss franc. You see the weights here, the euro being by far the most heavily weighted in this calculation. But the dollar has been gaining strength, guys, major strength, actually. If you look at this versus, as these trade deals have come through, which would make me think, hey, the markets are saying the U.S. is coming out as a winner in a lot of these. If the dollar is strengthening, so obviously, if the dollar weakens, it makes it easier for us to export. The dollar strengthens, means that we can import more. So I think these deals that are being made are actually being looked at pretty favorably for the U.S. right now. That brings me to Jerome Powell and what he had to say yesterday. Before we get there, I want to look at some comments here. Brazil exports cattle to the U.S. Hamburger prices going up. Okay. Interesting. I'll look into that. It's okay. I make my own coffee. Starbucks can be paying $20 for a grande. Bro, I got an espresso machine on Black Friday, like, I don't know, 2 years ago. I use it every day. When I'm in St. Louis, though, I do go out and get coffee. I worked in solar. I did work in solar for like 15 years. Can you get me a deal on some 10-2? Got 100 feet last year for like $125. Now 100 feet costs $200. I don't know what 10-2 is. I don't know what that is, man. I wasn't an installer. I was in sales. Hey, I know how solar works. This is a great question, Bob. Is the continued strength of the dollar what we want? That's a good question. And that is one that Scott Besson's hinted at several times, that they want a weaker dollar so we can export more. So I don't know. I don't know if that's what they want. We don't really know what their grand plan is here, but I think it's a fair question. And you would think, just like without looking at the economics, everyone would be like, well, of course you want the dollar to be stronger. I mean, if we're looking to build up manufacturing and export more, then yeah, I would imagine we would want to potentially have a weaker dollar. I don't know. He said 10 to electrical wire. Man, the only cabling I know was Cat 6 cable I use for my helium installs. So learn a lot about Cat 4 and Cat 6 and what the difference is, which is really just you can run one longer than the other. There's really 4 lines through there, but you have separators in there so you can run Cat 6 longer distances. And then also the grounding cable. I don't know much about electrical, man. That's not my expertise, I'll be honest. All right. So, Bob, I think that's a really good question. Do we want the dollar to strengthen? It's a good question. All right. Let's talk about what Jerome, well, let's just break down. I'm going to play a couple clips from him, but Jerome Powell said what we expected him to say. They want to know more about the tariffs. Interesting. He did mention a lot that, if we cut rates too soon, inflation can go up. If we wait to cut, though, and this is something kind of newer, he hasn't said a lot. If we wait too long to cut, though, the job market could really suffer. And to me, I'm going to play a clip here too, but to me, I think he sees the job market is starting to weaken. The unemployment numbers don't tell the whole story. And I think we can kind of read between the lines here and what he means by that. So there's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of talk about, just not as much about uncertainty necessarily, but really trying to, efficiently move to a neutral rate. So he still considers the rates right now as tightening, well, I forget what the term he exactly used, but he said that we are likely to, he wants to lower rates, but he wants to make sure that, it's not going to cause inflation. He was asked about the mortgage industry. I thought this was kind of interesting. He was asked about mortgage rates. And he's like, well, we don't control mortgage rates. We control the Fed rate. And that's true. Just because he lowers the Fed rate doesn't mean the mortgage rates are going to go down. So he said the best thing we can do is look to, control prices, so control, inflation, and make sure there's a good job market, right? What's up? Got my dog down here. All right. Hi. Okay. All right, so we're going to play this clip here. And there's a couple questions in particular that I wanted to play. All right, here's the first one. Let me mute myself so it doesn't flow through to you guys.
And I wanted to see if you could walk us through what was the discussion with the committee around that. We've seen delinquency rates rising for upper income households. How do you see that evolving in the next few months, and how much of a vulnerability that is for the economy going forward?
So in particular, she asked, consumer spending is slowing down. Credit card delinquencies are on the rise. What do you have to say about that? Sorry, the first part was cut off, so I'm going to reiterate it.
Consumer spending had been very, very strong for the last couple of years, and had repeatedly, forecasters, not just us, had been forecasting it would slow down, and now maybe it finally has. So I would say, if you talk to credit card companies, for example, they will tell you that the consumer's in solid shape.
Of course, the credit card companies, they're going to stay in solid shape. But we know what the metrics are. We've been talking about this. Credit card delinquencies are on the rise. Credit card debt is an all-time high. Credit card companies love that because they make interest. So of course they're going to say, and he can tell, it's hard for him to even say that with a straight face. So yeah, no, I don't buy that part of it, to be honest.
And that spending is at a healthy level. It's not growing rapidly, but it's at a healthy level, and delinquencies are not a problem. You mentioned high-end delinquencies. I don't know what to make of that. I read the same thing, but so generally, and if you look at the banks, and when the banks talk about in their earnings calls, the performance of credit has been good. So essentially, you have a consumer that's in good shape and is spending, not at a rapid rate, but it's true, and it was again right in line with what we expected. The GDP data that we got this week. And I think it's still a little bit difficult to interpret because you have these massive swings in net exports, which may also be affecting. Some of that can be can affect consumer spending as well. Look, it's one of the data points that we pay most careful attention to, and there's no question that it's slowed. And we're watching it closely, but we also watch the labor market and the performance of inflation. Those are our two variables that we're assigned to maximize.
Okay, so he said that the consumer spending is slowing. There's no doubt about it. You can tell he was fumbling over his words there. Like, yeah, dude, he realizes things are like effed up right now. He knows people over the last 2 years, we expected consumer spending to slow down, but people are using credit cards. Credit card delinquencies are up. He's not fooling anybody. Let's be real. So that was the first part that I thought was interesting, like him acknowledging that consumer spending is definitely slowing down. There's no doubt about that. He also did mention, and this is something he talked about earlier, and something we talked about yesterday, the GDP numbers that came in for Q2, well, it was inflated because they'd pulled in all those shipments in Q1, which had actually showed slower GDP. So he did talk about that early on. He did mention it there. But this next question is also really interesting regarding the job market.
And just to follow up on what my colleagues were asking about the dissents, Governor Waller said that the labor market is on edge, and he was pointing to weaknesses on the private sector. I was wondering, you said that the main number to look at is the unemployment number overall, but what was the discussion about the state of the private jobs market?
So I'm not going to talk about any individual's, any individual's comments. I wouldn't do that. But I think what we know is that private sector job creation, certainly in the last report we'll see on Friday, but had come down a bit. And if you take the QCEW adjustment seriously, it may be even low, maybe close to zero. But the unemployment rate was still low. So what that's telling you is that demand for workers is slowing, but so is the supply. So it's in balance. Oddly enough, you've got a very low unemployment rate, and it's kind of been there for a year as job creation has moved down. But also we know that because of immigration policy, really, the flow into our labor force is just a great deal slower, and those two things have slowed more or less in tandem. If you look at things.
And that part right there is really important. The unemployment rate does not tell the whole story. What we're seeing is because of the immigration policy and a lot of people being deported, we're seeing that there are jobs that are opening on that front. Okay, but we're also seeing that there are a lot of layoffs happening in the white collar space. We're seeing all these layoff reports left and right. So he's like, unemployment's staying okay. He's like, job openings are going up, but the workers are also in balance. It's like, okay, well, there's a mismatch right now, and a lot of it is the immigration policy, and that's something that's really important to note. Now, the other part of this too is like the gig economy. As these people are getting laid off, I know people personally, several of them, that are picking up Uber and Lyft, because they got laid off from their job, and people are having a really hard time finding employment right now. That's going to be threatened as well. Okay, so. And before I get into that, though, I just want to say, I believe Powell now is in a really tough spot. There are two people on the committee that wanted to drop rates, and that's not normal, right? So there are two people that there's questions. Some people think that maybe they're posturing for his position in May, so they're like, "Hey, we're going to side with Trump here, be outward about it, so that we can be potentially in the race for the new head of the Fed job." So there's some speculation that that's why they went against Powell's decision here. But it is worth noting that two people did dissent. Okay, so that is what it is. But the one thing that we've talked about a bit with the job market, and that's kind of been shielding things a bit, is the gig economy. And I talked about this on a space earlier, but Tesla is now in the Bay Area in San Francisco with their robotaxi. This is coming a lot sooner than people realize. And this is going to be something that maybe it's 6 months from now, maybe it's a year from now. You're going to see a lot of economists, you're going to see a lot of this in the news, because the gig economy has held up the job market. There's a lot of people in the white collar space getting laid off, picking that up as a way to make ends meet. Those jobs are going to get replaced by autonomous taxis. Again, it's not going to happen all at once, but you're going to see it in the major cities, and it's going to be a bleed, and eventually it's going to become a really, really big problem for our economy. That's a big reason why I think we haven't had really a crazy recession like we maybe would have had back in 2008, because there are these odd jobs that people can kind of pick up today, where in the past they would have been unemployed. So that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on in the coming months, and really over the next year, as we see more and more robo-taxis come into play. But the job market, again, is not as strong as just looking at unemployment. You have to really get into the details a little bit. And I think, from what he said, you can kind of do so. Let's see. That's it. Before we get into the crypto, it did not stop. Microsoft did get up to be the second company. They're back down a little bit now, but they had some huge runs. They outperformed expectations. Microsoft became the second company to hit a $4 trillion valuation. NVIDIA almost hit 4.5 trillion the other day. Really, the Mag 7, Mag 8 are holding up the economy right now. not even the economy, just the stock market. Let's be real. The economy is struggling. The stock market has been strong, and it's really been held up by the surge in AI. I also read an article this morning. I don't have it pinned here, but Facebook, because we talk about it all the time anyway. Facebook and Microsoft are investing tens of billions of dollars over the next quarter in AI. So this AI movement is really what's propping up the stock market right now. And that's the big reason why I do like all these GPU plays in the deep end space, because I think that they can really have massive market caps because there's going to be so much demand there. All right, I can close those tabs and make it a little bit easier for me to, to navigate now. You said a little behind Brazilian coffee is so good too. Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts. We'll see if they come to a deal there, but that's going to really hurt Brazil. You know, it's interesting because we're really shifting the whole dynamic for some of these countries. Like I mentioned yesterday, China has had to really start for a while was dumping product into Europe. And, you know, Europe kind of is in this situation where it's like, well, we kind of need to get a deal struck with the U.S. to kind of force China's hand so they can't keep dumping product into our markets and kind of force China to come to the U.S. in good faith and make a deal. So I think things are starting to move. Really, things are starting to move. I mean, I know I just like repeated the same thing, but it is true. Like for a while there, it was looking a little dire. Especially back in like April when the markets freaking dropped out. But I think things are starting to come together. You wouldn't know it. The media won't ever, you know, give any recognition. But I think there's some due actually. Let's talk about the crypto side of things. So this is big. We actually obviously had the crypto guidance, I guess, or the documents that came out yesterday. This came out today. In highlighted here, they say, today I am announcing the launch of Project Crypto, a commission-wide initiative to modernize the securities rules and regulations to enable America's financial markets to move on chain. There you go. Guys, the financial rails are moving on chain. It's happening. Even BlackRock came out, speaking of financial rails on chain, says that the U.S. rulebook turns stablecoins into payment method of the future of finance. So this is we're seeing this shift in real time. Most people out there in the population have zero clue what's happening right now. Like we're on top of this stuff, but this stablecoin bill, people are going to be using stablecoins and have no idea they're using stablecoins. I mean, that's where this is headed right now. But the big banks are on board. Says here again, just kind of repeating the same thing. BlackRock said the stablecoins now sit at the heart of the future of finance with the recently approved Genius Act. But I don't know about this part. It says detailed how the law rewrites the rule book. Legislation now classifies stablecoins as a payment method, bans interest on balances, and confines issuance to federally regulated banks, some registered non-banks, and state-chartered firms. Well, that certainly sounds a lot like a CBDC, doesn't it? Yeah. Even though they passed this, they're anti-CBDC bill. This is really interesting. BlackRock pointed to Tether and Circle as the largest buyers with at least 120 billion in T-bills, roughly 2% of the roughly 6 trillion in bills outstanding. It says, even if demand grows, though, the Institute expects only a small effect on bill yields because money will largely rotate from similar assets. And it says the Treasury plans to keep expanding bill supply. No shit. Dude, this is how they're going to finance our debt, guys. They want all these stable coins to be issued so they can keep selling them Treasury bills to back the stable coins because that's going to finance the debt, the big hole that we have to fill. This is why they're pushing so hard for this. All right. So let's talk about Bitcoin. Sitting at 116,561. Guys, it dropped down to under 115 yesterday, I believe. It took a little bit of a dip, surged back up, but we're consolidating. But will we hold on? I mean, I think we've been consolidating this range. I think we are due to have a breakout at some point, but will we correct further before it happens? I don't know. Michael Saylor said that they have their earnings call today. He was quoted as saying this will be the most important event in the history of strategy. Bullish. I hope that means it's good news. If it's important, I imagine it is. And then Bitcoin dominance sitting at 61.69%. You know, it's interesting. I had a thread that my boy Tyler from Unleashing Deepin posted last night, and we actually started. We're going to talk on the Deepin Happy Hour about this tonight, about Bitcoin dominance and how I think we're going to have to remove stablecoins from the equation, because if we're looking at as an indicator of alt season, stablecoins are going to grow in the matter of trillions of dollars in the coming years. But it's not like it used to be where people got into stablecoins to invest in Bitcoin and altcoins. It's going to be used as like payments. So I don't think it should be part of the equation moving forward when you're looking at Bitcoin dominance. It's going to skew the dominance downward because it'll be grouped in with alts. And I don't think that's a true indication of alt season. I want to play this because there's a lot of talk right now and speculation that these treasury companies could end up being the downfall and what pushes us in the next bear market. And I think this is kind of interesting coming from the Ethereum, or sorry, what's this guy's name again? It's from SharpLink Gaming. Gosh, what's his name? I'm drawing a blank on his name. Anyway, SharpLink is one of the bigger Ethereum treasuries. But check this video out. Oh, let me get my volume going.
And I am curious as to whether there is any sort of downside hedge.
Whoa, feedback.
As a result.
Yeah, so currently,
Does leverage come into play? Oh, and I am curious as to whether there is any sort of downside hedge that you have to take as a result.
Yeah, so currently we're not levered at all. We are considering offering convertibles, which will involve some leverage. And no matter what we do, we're going to keep leverage very much in check. We'll have a pretty low risk profile. We believe that decentralization is going to grow dramatically over time, and that will result in extreme appreciation of Ether and Bitcoin and some other tokens. And so the only thing that we need to do is to remain prudent with respect to risk levels, and our shareholders will benefit.
That is a little bit concerning. Okay, Joe Lubin is his name. So anyway, we're seeing this with MicroStrategy. A lot of these treasury companies are starting to use a lot of leverage, and if we see a shock to the system and a panic suing and sells. Panic selling ensues, that can be really bad. I mean, I think that actually could push us into the next bear market, potentially. So that's something to keep an eye out on, guys. It's not all sunshine and rainbows with that. I just want to pull this up. This is what I was talking about with my boy Tyler. He got a response from Adam Back, who may or may not be Satoshi. We're going to talk about this, talking about the alt season breakout and whether or not we'll see a major altcoin run or not. We'll talk about it on the Deepin Happy Hour tonight, so make sure to be on there, guys. But I thought that was kind of cool. You got a response from Adam Back. Somehow, only 451 people saw it, even though Adam Back has 683,000 followers. Explain that to me. What's up with the algorithm here? That's kind of weird. All right, we're gonna get into some Deepin stuff, and then I'm gonna close out because my computer's gonna die soon. I want to make sure I get through everything. Thank you all for joining me today from my lovely abode in St. Louis. It's not really mine, my family's. Okay, let's go to the crypto bubbles. Man, it's been a kind of a rough week, guys. I'm not gonna lie, been a rough week. Still looking good on the month. I think the tariff situation, I think all the uncertainty there is kind of played into all that. By the way, one thing I do want to, I'll upload up on Monday, but into September is looking like it could be pretty toppy. I've talked about how I think the Fed finally cutting rates could be a buy the rumor, sell the news event. Also, if you look at global liquidity, that's when it started contracting, which has been tied to the price of Bitcoin. So that's something we'll dig into more when I get back in Chicago. But I think into September, a lot of things are aligning that it could be a pretty big top signal. Hopefully not. I know a lot of people think that we're going to like run into like all the way through 2026. I mean, I don't know. We're going to have volatility along the way. That's for sure, though. Okay, let's talk about a few deep end things here, guys. Sergeant Soul. Check him out, by the way. He has some good takes. He's doing some good deep end updates, too. In the report that came out, the digital assets report, deep end was mentioned 5 times. And in particular, this part. Consider an exemption for distributions of digital assets by decentralized physical infrastructure networks, deep end providers in securities transactions for purposes of rewarding participation in deep end networks. The way I read that is if you are, participating in the network and earning tokens, that would exempt you from being securities, from being a security. That is pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. We have to wait and see, though. This has not been passed as is. Okay, this still has to go to, let's see, it passed the House, so it still has to go to the Senate. But I was listening to a podcast about this on my drive, actually, to St. Louis last night. They worked pretty closely with the Senate on all of the language in that market structure bill. So they feel pretty good about it getting passed. There could be some changes still, but they feel pretty good about it. So this is a really important part right here. So we're going to have to see how this plays out for deep ends, but this could be really, really good news for the deep end sector if this is how it plays out. All right, a few other things. We got Dynex. Dynex is launching their own quantum chip. It's kind of interesting. When I talked to their team about this a while back, they were talking about how they were investing something like $50 million into this new chip. And when it comes down to their actual market cap, it's like $6.6 million. So, I mean, it's been on quite a run, 134% in the last month. It was up more. It pulled back a little bit. Of course, that's going to happen when you pump that hard. But this might be one that people are really sleeping on. I don't know, man. They've got a real product. They've got real customers. Demo mentioned that they're working with a top 5 automaker today. So that's super interesting as well. Where's that going to go? Demo's making moves. I know a lot of people are not happy about the subscription model, myself included, but they're making moves. They also found themselves on a #1 bestseller on Amazon. So they're selling them. I've been looking at the reviews on Amazon. They're pretty good. People are pretty happy with it. Demo price sitting at $23.2 million. It's been consolidating in this range for a while. Could Demo break out? I think it still could. I'm not, as I said before, I wouldn't build out like a whole fleet at this point because you're going to have to pay monthly on all those vehicles after 6 months after the subscription runs out. But I like the token. Ariel came out and said that the HiMapper team was remote yesterday, and they tested out some of their bees. So here's the findings: 6 bee cameras, 196 miles traveled, 13,000 object detections, 94% upload and process in under 60 seconds of creation, 2,315 unique road features created. So it said each bee averaged 2,000 detections in a 33-mile range, latency under 60 seconds. On 94% of detections means we can map highly dynamic road events like construction, police, and more. Most importantly, over the last few weeks, we have begun to see early signs that our map AI system improves itself as it drives more miles. So, man, the bee is working, y'all. Like the product is getting better and better. It's getting more real time. This is pretty good, and this is really they had a head start on a lot of the other projects out there. I think this is going to be a major moat for them to have this equipment and these types of products that no one else is going to really be able to do at scale, it's a pretty big deal. Now, you can argue what you want about how the revenue flows through, and I get that. 9.7% in the last month, it's up. Still not doing great. I mean, under 2 cents. Could this be one that has a major bounce back? I think it could. I'm not necessarily calling for new all-time highs, though. There's a lot more tokens in circulation now. It'd be really hard to get there. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm not betting on it. See, Rover and Mike Horton yesterday, or is this earlier today? This is earlier today. They had their space. I did listen in. I thought it was really interesting. So I asked about the open data set, guys. So I was like, how are they going to make money off an open data set? So apparently it's really just, it's not like all of their features. It's to allow companies to test out the product. But in order to use like the full capabilities and the full data set, they have to pay. It's also going to allow different entities to do like case studies, and there's going to be a lot of like reports that can be issued and based on the data sets. So I think that's a pretty strategic move, actually. But I really like what Rover's doing. They have, I think they said like 9 different potential customers they're currently talking to that's testing out their data sets. Feedback's been really good. I think this project has legs. I mean, they can get LiDAR technology and combined with the RTK data, they have really precise location data for that data set. I mean, that's something that most Web2 customers don't have. They don't have the RTK aspect. So when you combine the forces of Rover's LiDAR and the RTK of GeoNet, you really have a unique data set that's really valuable. It's going to be used to train these self-driving vehicle models. And then you look at, Rover's price action, 1.1 million market cap. Again, they don't have many tokens in circulation. That's why, but still, that's pretty solid. That's why I've been adding to the position. I think it could run up, do a short-term run up because of that. All right, couple last announcements here. We have the space coming up next week. It's going to be Exhibits, well, my favorite GPU project. We're going to have Mark Feidelman on with them. I've interviewed him before, but he's going to come on and he's got some cool insights on where AI is going, y'all. You should definitely join that space. They're doing massive things too. If you look, they continue to build out more data centers. They're in the US, they're also in Asia, they're also in Europe, but they're partners. Everyone's sourcing from them, all the big players. Render's sourcing GPUs from them, IONET, because they're building out data centers, right? IONET's doing it, Cache, Aether. They just announced Nosana. All of the GPU aggregators are all pulling from Exhibits. So we'll bring Mark on. We'll have an hour-long discussion with him. We'll be able to ask him questions. So hop into that session for sure. The following week, we're going to bring on Harry Dewhurst from 375 AI. And some big news there that they've been posting about. They're 97% of the way to their TGE. So TGE token launch is coming very soon for 375 AI. So that is the following Tuesday. You guys would definitely want to hop into that one. Harry Dewhurst, that guy is like incredibly accomplished. And lastly, y'all, the Deep In Happy Hours tonight. That time is wrong. It's actually 8 Eastern time, 7 Central time. They also need to put me in the picture still. So I am now on the official crew. I'm going to be a little bit late, though. I've got a family reunion dinner tonight, so I'm going to be on a little bit late. But, guys, make sure to tune in to the Deep In Happy Hour. We've got some pretty good discussions planned around whether alt season's coming, around the digital assets report that just came out. Some pretty cool topics we'll be talking about, so make sure to tune in tonight to the Deep In Happy Hour. If you don't follow the X page, make sure to do so. I'm going to try to stream to my channels as well. And that's what I got. So hopefully this all worked out okay. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay the whole time. It's weird when my travel setup connection's not fantastic. It's all right. Have my puppers come in for a minute. Say bye. Say bye to everybody. So you can say bye to Zoe. Hi. All right. I appreciate you guys. I might be back on tomorrow. We'll see. If not, I'll be back on Monday when I get back to Chicago. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Make sure to like and share on X, so it will be recorded. Appreciate you all. Have a fantastic day.